In this video, I'm going to talk about how to remove the whole door, which is surprisingly simple. Depending on what you want to do, so for example, with the lift, if I was working on the interior of a car, just not having the doors there is very, very convenient. So if you just want to remove the whole thing, it's reasonably heavy with everything installed. You can quite happily do that. It only takes about 5 minutes. But if you're thinking of removing it so you can disassemble the door itself, I would suggest leaving it in place and then stripping it whilst it's connected to the car, because it's much easier to handle when it's just sitting here. And then pull off just the frame itself of the door later on, because it'll be much, much lighter. But you can do it either way, depending on what you want to do. The way this all fits together, and it's very, very simple and typically modular of the way Porsche has done things. The wiring harness just connects to a couple of points underneath here, so you disconnect this and it just pushes straight through and just comes out with the door. The door arrestor, which is this thing here, we just disconnect that screw there, remove that. And then for each of the hinges, there's just a little plastic thing that goes over the top. There's an E-Torx, and you just remove a grub screw that looks like that. That's all it is. And once that's removed, the thing just lifts straight up and off. So it's pretty simple. The thing to be careful of is we don't want to damage things up here, because as you're lifting that up, obviously there is the potential of hitting that. So I would suggest having all of that taped off, maybe some foam in there or something like that, especially if you're lifting up the whole door with everything attached to it, because it probably weighs 25 kilos or so. And especially if you're just doing it by yourself, that's going to be a little bit hard. So I would suggest having a second person to do that. To get access to the electrics behind here, we'll need to remove this panel. The first thing we need to do is the piece that runs along the side here. You'll need to pull that off. Basically just get your fingers under it at the edges and then just pull those off. There are 4 clips along the underside of that need to come free. And then we need to remove the seal, just pull that out, and then we get access to this. First thing you want to do is disconnect the clip at the top here. Just get a pry tool and open up the plastic piece from that. It will be sitting in a clip that looks like that. This is the one from the other side. And then we need to go down here. There are 2 pieces of Velcro, which is what they are. And you need to sort of just get your fingers underneath here and just pull it inwards and they will pop off. Sometimes the Velcro patch, because these stick like crazy, will still be stuck to the bit on the frame. So you may need to go in there and separate those and put those back on here prior to installation. And then at the front, you've got this bit here. There's a clip in here. And this comes out rearwards. You can see this plunger there. Very easy to snap that off if you sort of go sideways. So what you want to do is just get your hands behind here once it's released from the Velcro and pull it rearward, and then it'll come free. And these are the electrical connectors on the other side. It's the 2 at the top here. I've disconnected those and it'll just go straight through there once they're done. And the easiest way to do that, I find, is once those disconnected, get your hands underneath it here and peel it off from this side so it's pulled out each way, and then you can feed it from the inside and pull it out towards the door. So those electrical connectors, that's what it's going to look like. Obviously, like I talked about before, you're going to peel it off like that and pull it towards either that way or that way, and then you can feed that through really easily. The electrical connectors, they're pretty simple. You just grab that tab there, pull it, and then just disconnect those. For the arrestor, that's obviously with it disconnected, where that screw would have gone through there. What I find is probably a little bit easier is when the door is fully open, it sticks out to about here, but you need to have it fully open to get access or good access to that screw. So what I found was probably the best thing to do was loosen off the screw with the door fully open and then half close it so it retracts just a little bit so it's not sticking out quite as far with that screw still in there, because it'll enable you to do that, and then remove the screw. Be aware also, the moment you remove this screw here, the door will want to flop closed. So whilst you're doing all of this, just have something there to stop it, like a box or something to keep it from closing on you. And then you can see this is where those 2 grub screws went. What we need to do is they're just going to be attached there. We need to remove those, and then the thing just pulls straight out. Something to be aware of when you are removing it, especially if you're doing it with one person, the center of gravity is pretty much directly underneath that point there. And so I used a trolley jack with a big piece of foam over the top of it so I couldn't scratch the bottom of the door, and I gently lifted it under that point and it just popped off those hinges and I was able to move it away pretty easily. adjustment of the door position is done via this big bolt here. So there's one on each of the hinges. And you have access to this with the door open, but also it takes a triple square on the way in this way. So this would be where the front wing would be. And there's a plastic piece on the inside of the front wing if that was removed. And I'm assuming this is what they do in the factory when they just fit the panels before they go and paint it, is that it's much simpler to have the door closed, and then you can adjust these and just move it so you align it perfectly top and bottom, etc., and then tighten those up. So if you have all that off, then that's the way I would adjust that. However, if you don't have that, then it's pretty simple just to loosen these slightly and just move them a little bit. Just be really careful when you are closing the door, because if these start to move, there's a lot of adjustment in this. You can start to impinge on that front wing panel when you close the door, so be really careful of that. But that's the way you would do the adjustments.